Good afternoon, and welcome to the Smart Women Savvy Money 2010 webinar series. 30 minutes on the clock, 20 minutes to teach, and 10 to talk. Smart Women Savvy Money is a platform offered through Urban Wealth Management designed to provide women with the tools and resources they need to create the life they desire and deserve. Effective this month, this is hot off the press, we're introducing the Smart Women Club, where you will receive monthly emails meant to stimulate provocative thinking, educate you about financial issues, and ultimately to create a community of women who are equally interested in learning how they can make savvy decisions with their money. Our Smart Women Savvy Money series is held the second Thursday of each month from 1 to 1:30 p.m. Pacific Time. We know you're busy, so we've designed these calls to be short but impactful, with time to answer questions, which you can do by posting your questions in the chat box. And depending on your device, whether you're on a mobile app, on your phone, a tablet, it could either be in the middle of your screen or at the top. For our schedule of upcoming events, webinars, and latest blogs, please visit our website at www.urbanwm.com. Here you'll be able to look at our wonderful blog. We've got fabulous topics that we are posting every day from guest bloggers as well as from our own staff. You can also check on any upcoming events, webinars, any media programs that are upcoming. That's me from CNBC from last week. And if you want to reach out to us about any topics that you want to know more about and have some interest in exploring, we're here. For our schedule of our upcoming events, please visit this site. Next month, our tech diva, Zenobia Millett, will be back to share her ideas about how we can deal with that very, very pesky problem of how to manage and store all those passwords. Yikes, I can't wait for that one. I am so tired of trying to remember on pieces of paper and secret areas where I put my password. So really looking forward to that. Now, before we get started on today's very timely talk, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. As you heard at the beginning of this session, our calls are being recorded, and the replays will be sent out at the conclusion of today's talk. They'll be sent out later today. We'll try as best as possible to stay on time, but for those who want to continue the conversation, feel free to reach out to me or our guest speaker for additional information and ideas. Our returning guest speaker, Kristen Berman, is Urban Wealth Management go-to professional for all of our clients' long-term insurance, long-term care, and insurance needs. Being a specialist affords her the ability to evaluate individuals' needs and match them to the right platform of coverage and insurance carrier. What she's going to share with us today is truly timely given the changes that are taking place in the long-term care industry, and more importantly, how those changes are affecting women. All right, Kristen?
Thank you so much, Renee. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so, I think we would all agree that it really does take a lifetime of commitment and hard work to earn and build your retirement assets to a point where you feel confident that you'll be able to successfully retire and not run out of money, even if you live to a ripe old age. However, we have to realize that no retirement plan is secure without a funded plan for how you're going to pay for your personal care assistance needs, or what we call in the industry long-term care. So my question for everyone today is, are you one of the approximately 11% who have already purchased some type of a long-term care insurance policy? Or are you one of the approximately 15% who have made some other type of plan to pay for it? Or are you one of the approximately 75% who are currently without a plan? So a large part of what we're going to be addressing today is, why is long-term care a growing concern, especially for women? And more importantly, what can we all do about it? So long-term care truly is a woman's issue for a couple of reasons. First, think about how many of you know women that have either been a caregiver or know another woman that has been a caregiver or been a caregiver yourself. Because the fact is the overwhelming majority of caregivers are women. So why is this important? Well, just ask anyone who's experienced this burden about the physical, financial, and emotional demands. And guess what? After all this, is it really any surprise when these same women then become largely impacted as long-term care recipients themselves? So next, let's consider another impact on caregivers that really cannot be ignored. So while many of them give with open hearts for their loved ones, it does typically come at a high personal price. For example, women who leave the workforce to care for an ailing parent, spouse, or a family member, they're going to lose on average just over $324,000 in wages and Social Security benefits. So what might this look like? Well, when you consider that 55% of women caregivers do so while still working full-time, is it any surprise really that career concessions are generally made along the way? I mean, in fact, about 61% end up passing up promotions or being passed up for a promotion, or they might take a leave of absence or have to cut back to part-time status. And in the end, nearly one-third will end up retiring earlier than they had planned. So let's take this one step further and look at what life may look like for us women as we do get much older. So for a myriad of reasons, older women often have fewer resources to plan or provide for their own long-term care needs. Why? Well, older women, and in this case we're defining that as over age 65, are less likely to be married than older men. In fact, only 46% of women over age 65 are married, while 72% of older men tend to be married, and 35% of these women end up as widows. So this adds up to the fact that almost half of older women live alone. So far, just to kind of review at this point, we've determined that women are highly impacted by being primary caregivers in families. Women are often alone in their older years. And then to add to this issue, women also tend to live longer than men. So in general, the longer anyone lives, the greater your chance for needing long-term care. So we're finding the average amount of time that a woman needs long-term care is about 3.7 years, whereas men, on average, need long-term care services for 2.2 years. Lastly, one more note on the impact of being a caregiver. Career interruptions will, of course, have a negative impact on your ability to save for retirement, and women caregivers' retirement assets tend to be approximately $40,000 less than men's. So is it any real surprise that women who are caregivers are 2.5 times more likely to live in poverty than non-caregivers? So I think we're pretty clear now that women have a much greater need for long-term care than men, and women are using long-term care benefits at a much greater rate than men. So what tends to happen when a high-risk group is determined for insurance purposes? You probably guessed it, the cost goes up. So this is one of the reasons why we're holding this timely webinar, is to let all of our women friends know that rates for women have been increased by an average of approximately 40% over the cost for men, with almost all long-term care insurance carriers just over this past year. However, we do have a small window of time to secure coverage with an excellent carrier before they also follow suit. So let's talk a bit more about how the best way is to fund your plan, as well as some of the most common myths that are responsible for all that lack of planning. So myth number 1, the government's going to pay for my long-term care. So some people are going to assume and do assume that Medicare will pay, but the reality is that Medicare will pay very little and only under certain circumstances. It's pretty complicated, all the details of when Medicare pays and how Medicare pays and if they're going to pay at all. But for example, Medicare, for them to pay at all, you must first be admitted to a hospital, and any time spent in the ER doesn't count. You actually have to be admitted upstairs. And then you have to be in the hospital for a minimum of 3 days. And then you have to be admitted from there to a care facility within 30 days of that hospitalization for you to receive any Medicare coverage at all. Then, if both of those needs are met, then Medicare is going to pay for 100%, but only for 20 days. Then from day 21 to up to 100 days, you're going to have to incur the first $152 per day yourself, and then after those 100 days, they're not going to pay anything. So you're paying out of pocket for 100% of your costs after 100 days. So, and then another thing too is that you must require skilled care by a professional staff. So custodial care, which is more along the lines of personal care or long-term care, doesn't qualify you at all. Now Medicaid, which in California we refer to as Medi-Cal, only pays if you're essentially a ward of the state, meaning that you are impoverished, and then you lose all control as you can only receive care in Medi-Cal accepting nursing homes. Unfortunately, not your nicest places. And with that said, because medical debt is such a large issue, it happens to be the #1 cause of personal bankruptcies. So Medicaid does really end up paying about 2/3 of all nursing home care costs, but at what personal cost? Okay, myth number 2. I can save the money I need for long-term care. Reality, 2/3 of Americans 40 and above have not set aside any money to pay for long-term care. Yet 3 years of care, which we're looking at because that's the average need, can quickly total $230,000 or more. Myth number 3, I'm not going to need long-term care. Well, honestly, it's very difficult for any of us to picture what we're going to be like many years down the road, and it's human nature to deny that we're ever going to be in need of that. That can't be you, right? In fact, I'm not even joking, but I now have an app on my phone to help people to confront this themselves. And this app allows you to take a picture of yourself, and then it will visually aid you right before your very eyes. This can be a really helpful wake-up tool. But the reality is that 70% of people who make it to age 65 can expect to use some form of long-term care during their lives. To put that into perspective, for other things we all tend to insure, there is really only a 3% chance that your home's ever going to burn down, yet we all go out and buy homeowners insurance. There's only an 18% chance of you ever having an automobile accident in your lifetime, yet we all have to go out and buy our car insurance, yet so few people really fund a plan to cover a 70% risk that can be devastating to both your finances and your dignity. Myth number 4, only older people need to think about long-term care. Well, the reality is the earlier you start planning for your long-term care, the better. Ideally, and this may shock some of you, but the planning process should really begin in your 40s. And if you're considering using insurance as part of your plan, I would not wait. As we mentioned, the rates are going up substantially for women, and they've been going up steadily overall since the long-term care insurance companies have originally greatly underestimated their costs in the early years. But also, we're seeing available benefits decreasing all the time as insurance companies who still are in the market at all are trying to cap their risks, especially since we're going into a period of expanded lifespans. So not only does the chance of needing long-term care rise considerably the longer you live, but these current policies tend to be purchased with inflation protection, and that allows your policy benefit to grow for as long as you live with no caps. So with all this said, it's getting much harder to even get an offer for long-term care, especially since insurance companies are exiting the market rapidly, and no one that's left, honestly, is really even looking to write a lot of traditional long-term care. So the bottom line again is if it's on your radar at all, please don't wait, because there's really no obligation just to apply, just to even see if you're going to get an offer. Okay, myth number 5, our last one, is my health insurance will pay for long-term care if I need it. Reality is, I can't tell you how many well-educated people that I come across who believe that their health insurance or Medicare will pay. Health insurance does not cover long-term care needs, and as we already discussed, there's a very limited role that Medicare will play. So, who is really paying all these long-term care needs? Well, it depends on where our personal care needs are being met. Is it in a home or is it in more of a facility type setting? Well, it depends if the financial resources were allocated beforehand. So no planning, honestly, is really a default position. It means that you must rely on your family members for care if your care can be met in the home, or your government assistance plans are going to be your only answer only after you've exhausted all of your assets. But realize again, as we mentioned before, if this is the case, this care will generally take place in a nursing home and one that only accepts Medicaid. So let's break this down a little bit more specifically. So this chart is a pretty good reference because it gives you a really good idea on breaking down who's really paying for everything. So you can see that a small percentage is planned for and paid by private long-term care insurance companies or veterans or state programs. Then some care is being paid out of pockets, just out-of-pocket costs, dollar for dollar by families. Then we mentioned the role that Medicare pays, and again, only if certain circumstances are met. Then we have $130 billion a year that's being paid by Medicaid, and again, remember, that's your nursing home costs. And then what do we see there? The huge majority of the costs are being paid by families with unpaid family caregiving in the home. So you see, really, the bottom line is that families are paying for about $71 of every $100 that's being spent on care. So the bottom line is we all need to prepare for the possibility of needing long-term care. So the question is, what are our best options? Well, we could self-insure and utilize some of our retirement savings, or we could qualify for government assistance, which will involve spending down your family assets. And just word of caution on that one, the government's been pretty in tune to people that try to do that, so they've put real recent, pretty strict restrictions on people that try to transfer their assets. And then also, they're also going after people's estates. If the government has paid for nursing home care, they're very likely going after your estate now to see if they can recoup some of that cost. And then lastly, as we've talked about, what about transferring some of the risk to a private insurance company? So as we've talked about, many people now choose to prepare for the possibility of needing long-term care by transferring some of that risk to an insurance company. So when you buy long-term care, essentially you're paying a premium to an insurance company so that if someday the risk becomes a reality, you're going to have a source of money to help you pay the expenses of long-term care. So there are many different ways to prepare for, use long-term care insurance for this. One approach is to fully insure, which means that your policy is designed to pay all or most of your expenses. Another approach is to partially insure, which means that your policy is designed to pay a portion of your expenses, and you pay the balance of expenses yourself. But with either approach, you're not leaving yourself completely exposed to the cost of long-term care expenses. An additional possibility people often consider or try to compare pros and cons to is, what if I were just going to self-insure and pay for long-term care costs out of my own savings or my own investments? Well, this chart, which is good for illustrative purposes, will compare the option of self-insuring to what if you decided to put the same amount of money into purchasing a long-term care policy. So what this shows you is the difference if you put about $2,500 a year into either an investment type or some kind of a savings component, versus purchasing a long-term care insurance policy for that same $2,500 a year. And this shows over a pretty long span of period, 30 years. So you'll see that we made some assumptions here. With the investment, we're looking at a net after-tax yield of 4% over 30 years as compared to the inflation growth that you would receive with a long-term care insurance policy. So you see at the end of 30 years, there's a really big difference. With the long-term care policy creating a pool of benefit of about $1.2 million, and those are tax-free dollars, versus about $140,000 in your investment account. So that really shows you the leveraging power of a long-term care insurance policy. It also shows you why these insurance companies are pretty scared about the fact that, you only paid so much in premiums, yet they're on the hook for up to $1.2 million of benefits. So when it comes down to that, what we're looking at is that there's really a number of different options that you can choose to help fund your long-term care plan. And I realize we focus primarily on long-term care insurance, and a lot of that today is because of the timeliness of this concern. But just realize that when we work with our clients or when we try to assist you with helping to make your own plan, we do most typically use a number of different tools together. So that might look like using some of your retirement assets or pension or savings as part of the plan. Again, long-term care traditional policies. Also, there's a lot of hybrid policies that are available, and that's becoming a lot more popular option today. And we're going to probably hold another one of these webinars that delves into that option more specifically because it's a whole other topic itself. But suffice it to say, when we say hybrid, it tends to combine a few different needs, not just long-term care, but also maybe life insurance or annuity. They can be a great answer as part of the puzzle itself. Just realize you're not going to get as much leveraging of your dollar because it's meant to cover a few different risks. Or you could use income that you're going to generate for either a real estate investment that you made or some of your dividends. Or reverse mortgages are certainly an option that we discuss. But again, realize that it's really a big puzzle that we help you to address, and oftentimes the best approach is a combination of different approaches. So again, the main purpose of the main point we're trying to get across is the power really of a funded long-term care plan. It's going to put you really in the driver's seat. It's going to help you determine, where you want to live. And I know a lot of times when I even bring up long-term care insurance, the first thing that people start to think about is nursing home insurance. And honestly, that really is not the case at all. In fact, the majority of benefits, especially in the early years, about 80% of our benefits typically are paid to allow people to stay in their home or make adjustments to their home so that they can stay in their home. And then it helps you to be in control again of who you want to assist you. Again, our default is it's going to fall to our kids typically. If that's not something you're looking to do, then the purpose of having a funded plan is for you to be able to decide who you want to hire to assist you. Okay, and obviously if your goal is to not burden your loved ones with the physical, emotional, and financial pain of caregiving, that's the purpose of funding your plan. And it really, really does allow you to preserve your assets, of course, but also your dignity. So again, execute a plan now, and I can't even tell you what tremendous peace of mind it'll generate for you. So, bottom line is we want to leave you with this main thought. Ladies, remember, a man is not a plan, and doing nothing is not a plan. And finally, Uncle Sam is definitely not a plan. So now I'm going to let Renee take over again because we're now to the point where we would like to open this up to you, and it's chat time. So feel free to share with us any questions you might have, any thoughts on the presentation, anything that comes to mind. we're here to discuss with you. Thanks so much, everyone.
Great, Kristen. That was a great talk. And everyone, you have a chat box there where you can post your questions. I think that I have a couple of questions. First of all, I want to know what's that app that will tell you what you will look like at an older age.
It's called Aging Booth.
How do you spell that?
Aging, AGINGBOOTH, Aging Booth. I think there might be a couple, but that's the one I've been using.
Okay. Perfect. All right.
Fair warning, adults can be disturbing.
Okay. So the other question I had, though, and I see that we have some comments, great presentation, thank you. The idea that you said that, long-term care insurance, it's now the insurance carriers are charging up to 40% more for women. How can they get away with that?
Yeah, I know, and that it's such a concern of ours because, as you know, we advocate for women so much with everything to do with financial planning and security. But, I mean, at first glance, it does seem like discrimination, and when this first was announced, I know that a lot of us in the industry were in this uproar about it, claiming discrimination. But then they showed us that, this is really nothing new in the insurance industry. In fact, women tend to enjoy significantly lower rates for life insurance than men do. But in the case with long-term care, it's the flip-flop. But it is a considerable flip-flop. Very, very concerning.
Interesting. Okay. All right, ladies, we have a few more minutes left. Does anybody want to offer a question? Okay, I have a question here. This is from Ramon. I was under the impression that long-term care was no longer affordable as a number of carriers have stopped writing long-term care. Can you comment on that, Kristen?
Yes, of course. Ramona, that is a really, really good point. And you're right that as these rates have hit us, it has definitely made a big difference. But as we mentioned, there is a carrier that's still left in the industry that has all along been one of my very favorite carriers for a number of reasons with the way that they handle their long-term care policies. So that is still a reasonable cost. The other thing is that we do some very creative things to find discounts. There's a number of association discounts we can find. If any member of your family has ever served in the military, we can get you a discount for that. If there's any kind of partner situation, and that honestly is one of my best tools because it's very, very broadly described what a partner can be. It can just be somebody that you share your life with. And if you have somebody that we can give credit as a partner, then that can be a significant discount. If you both apply, that's a 30% discount for each of you. And with long-term care, the discounts that we can find for you, they're all stackable. So we might be able to get you a discount here and then another one to add on. So we're very, very good at trying to really, really get this for the least amount of cost. But like I said, I think if it's on your radar at all, don't be afraid to apply and just see what we can get and see how we can whittle down the cost for you.
Okay. Another question is, can you speak to what the tax deductibility is? How are these premiums treated on our, from a tax perspective?
Yes, that's a really, really good question. And the IRS really controls that. You do receive, it is generally speaking tax deductible. If you own any kind of a company, even a sole proprietorship, so sometimes I'll even advise somebody to open their own home-based business for that purpose, just so that you can call yourself a sole proprietor, because that will allow you not to have to meet the IRS adjusted gross income number, because it's really treated like health insurance. And if any of you have tried to deduct health insurance, you'll know that generally speaking, you have to meet 10% of your adjusted gross income. If you're over 50, that number is 7.5%, but under 50, it's 10%. And then anything above that you spend, you'll be able to deduct it. The IRS also allows a certain amount of deduction per age. And I can certainly send anybody that is interested in that a chart that shows you how much that you're able to deduct per age. But Suffice it to say, the older you get, the more you're able to deduct. And by the time you get to the upper tier, which is age 70 and above, you should be able to deduct 100% of it. It's almost $5,000 a year that you can deduct at that upper age.
Okay, great. All right, fabulous. Well, ladies, we are up at our 30-minute mark. I know that we have a few more questions. We are going to be reaching out to each and every one of you. Anyone who registered for today's talk will get the replay link, and you will actually have an opportunity to reply back to us. We're going to be sending you a quiz based on what you heard today, and you'll be able to respond to it, particularly if you do have an interest in having Kristen to speak to you or having us at Urban Wealth Management to talk to you about how does that fit into your financial plan, because I will tell you a great part of what we do is figuring out how to protect what you've built up. And that is the one area, health-related kinds of situations, that can really blow a hole in your plan. So we work together with Kristen to identify opportunities and the best platforms to protect you in this part of your life. We've be very open to talking to you about that. So with that said, we're going to end today's session. I want to thank everyone for being on today, and we look forward to having you on next month when we have our tech diva talking to us about how we can control and manage all those passwords. Take care and have a fabulous day.
Thank you, Renee.